Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Somewhere Else and Back Again by Zenithofthestars. After finding the One Piece, Luffy and Nami are separated from the crew and thrust into another world. 16 years have passed, and they find themselves back in their own home again. But what is waiting for them when they return? Adios.
Usopp almost had a fit when someone ran into town shouting about pirates. He was half tempted to join the man, bringing back his old ways. But then he realized they were serious. It's the Whitebeards. "Are you serious?" Usopp demanded. "Where?" He gestured madly towards the docks, out in the bay. "It's really them." Usopp laughed. "Great. This isn't great," the man shouted. "They've come to rob us, or murder us, or..." Usopp left the man to his ramblings as he walked towards the harbor. As he reached the end of the street, he could see the large figurehead of Marco's ship, despite the gathered crowd. "Honestly," Betty muttered, "last week was that pirate hunter, and this week it's the Whitebeards." "Last week was a fake," Usopp said. "I'm pretty sure they're real." Betty shook her head. "I'm heading to the other side of the island." "Usopp, are you going to come?" "Nah," Usopp waved a hand dismissively. "I want to see what Marco's doing here." Usopp left the crowd, arriving at the harbor. Several people were packing up and heading up to the town. Dre sighed. "Pirates again," he said as Usopp approached him. "It's getting annoying." "Only the ones who want to attack," Usopp said. "I wonder what Marco is doing here." He began waving. "You're waving them over." Dre looked incredulous. "Yeah, they have no reason to be in the East Blue. In fact, Marco is one of the emperors. He should be in the New World, or at least the Grand Line." Usopp lowered his hand as a blue bird rose from the ship and began to fly over. "We should probably get out of here," Gert said, walking by. "We've never dealt with pirates of their caliber before, that is, if what you said about the pirate hunter was true." Usopp groaned and didn't respond to his comment, instead seating himself on the wooden ground and saying, "Go if you want, I'm going to talk to Marco." Enion scowled as he stopped in front of Usopp. "I want to meet him, brave warrior of the sea." His voice was mocking. Usopp shrugged, leaning back on his hands. "Sure. Marco's almost here, so stay if you want." Fear flickered across the man's face before he steeled himself. Gert and Dre left, leaving the two of them sitting and awaiting Marco's arrival. "Do you really know him?" "Yeah," Usopp nodded. "He's really close to Luffy, considering Luffy's brother was a Whitebeard pirate." Enion didn't respond, taking a step back as the large flaming phoenix angled itself into a steep dive. As it neared the deck, the phoenix transformed. A tall blonde man hit the dock in a crouch, and straightened. "Been a long time, Usopp," Marco grinned and reached down. Usopp grabbed the outstretched hand. "You can say that again. It's good to see you, but what the hell are you doing here?" Marco laughed and hauled Usopp to his feet. "That's an interesting story actually. You would need to ask Milo for all the details." "Milo? New recruit?" "Sort of, not really. He's just traveling with us." Marco waved at the ship, which began moving in their direction. "You should probably meet him, he's the son of a friend." "Who's that?" He nodded at Enion. "Enion. He's a friend of mine," Usopp introduced. "Enion, stop gaping. This is Marco." Enion made a strangled sound in the back of his throat. "It's a Whitebeard." Marco nodded slowly. "Yes. I am. Are you, okay?" "He'll be fine," Usopp said, waving dismissively. "This Milo, whose son is he?" Marco turned to watch the ship's progression. "See that kid at the bow? Scrawny, black hair? That's Milo." The ship slowed and turned, lining up with the dock. "Hey, Milo, come down here." Usopp watched Milo turn, looking down at the two of them. He grabbed a rope and tossed it over, climbing down. He landed on the deck and turned to Marco, eyeing Usopp warily and ignoring Enion. Usopp felt himself stand up a bit straighter, proud that someone seemed suspicious of him and not Enion, who was much larger. "Hi," Milo said finally. "Yo," Usopp smiled. "Marco says your name is Milo?" "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" "My name's Usopp." Milo snorted inaudibly, but Usopp caught it. What's so funny? Sorry, but that's the strangest name I've ever heard. He covered his mouth to hide his grin. I didn't mean to laugh. Usopp shrugged. So, Marco says I know your dad. Care to share? Milo looked over at Marco. This guy knows Dad. He knows both your parents, Marco said. Several crew members had climbed or jumped down, several of them waving to Usopp before vanishing up the hill that led to the village. Milo examined the man in front of him. He seemed average, with an unusually long nose. But if he was a friend of his father's, and not back home in New York, well, he was probably a lot stronger than he looked. Milo had thought his parents to be lame, except for their stories, until just a few months ago. Now he had a hard time imagining them living peacefully as they had before. My dad's name is Luffy, Milo said, watching Usopp for a reaction. He got one. Usopp's eyes seemed to bulge out and his jaw dropped. He didn't say anything for a minute, making strange noises and gesturing madly with his hands. Finally, he managed to get out a word. Luffy? Marco placed a hand on Milo's shoulder. It's true, Marco said. And your mother? Usopp seemed scared to ask. Nami, Milo said. Usopp quivered on the spot for a minute, and Milo thought he was going to pass out. I have a sister too, Milo said as Usopp didn't speak. Her name's Belmir. This time, Usopp did fall over. Marco doubled over, laughing, and Milo turned back to glare. He caught Anion's gaze. The man was staring at him with a mixed expression. Surprise, disbelief. Milo frowned. What? Anion looked away and fled, walking quickly until he hit sand, and then running. Milo shook his head, wondering when he would get used to the craziness the people here possessed. Usopp sat up, and Milo held out a hand. Usopp grabbed it, and Milo helped him to his feet. So you're my captain's kid, huh? Sanji's going to go berserk when he finds out Nami and Luffy are together. That comment seemed to make Marco laugh harder. I feel sorry for Sanji, he said. First Robin and Frankie, now this. He shook his head. His restaurant is in this sea, right? Usopp nodded. Actually, Sanji is here. He'll probably be down when he hears you've arrived. Speaking of him, Haruta jumped down, landing beside Milo and making Usopp jump. I saw him coming down the road. True to her word, Sanji arrived a minute later, his blonde hair appearing over the hill. He joined them, grinning at Marco. I never thought I'd see you here. Miss us? Haruta snorted, and Sanji seemed to notice her. Ah, my lovely Haruta. Would you be so willing as tea? He was cut off mid-spin as Haruta drew her sword and placed it at his throat. You finish that sentence, I'm going to run you through, she warned through gritted teeth. Milo laughed, slapping a hand over his mouth. This must be the perverted cook from his parents' story. So which one are you? Milo asked Usopp. I met the swordsman, and Mom and Dad are the captain and navigator. What? Usopp seemed confused. Milo didn't know of his father's position until just recently. Marco explained, not bothering to stop Haruta as she assaulted Sanji. But Mom and Dad told me stories about adventurers, and used titles like captain, swordsman, doctor, that sort of thing. I'm guessing he's the cook. Milo pointed at Sanji. Or rather, where Sanji had just been standing. It seemed Haruta had pushed him off the dock and into the water. I'm the sharpshooter, Usopp said. How did you know he was part of the crew? Mom used to go on rants about a womanizing cook, Milo said, and Usopp just nodded. After Haruta stalked up the hill, Marco fished Sanji out of the water. Women hate me, Sanji cried dramatically, falling over in a heap. Usopp snorted, you wouldn't have as much trouble if you stopped flirting with others while you were dating. Sanji groaned and pressed his face harder into the wood. On a better note, Usopp continued, this Ison. Sanji's head shot up. What? Milo actually covered his ears to repel the girly shriek that came from the blonde man. Yeah, I am. Sanji pushed his torso up so he was sitting on his knees. You think you're Luffy's kid? I am, Milo repeated. Milo Monkey, or, I guess it's Monkey D. Milo here, right? Have you got any proof? Sanji stood up off his knees, towering over Milo. Sure. Milo reached into his pocket, drawing out his phone. He turned it on, noting that he had half power left. He had brought his charger this time, but he didn't know if there were any outlets that would fit it. Maybe when he met up with his parents they could have their shipwright adjusted. But he ignored the fact and held up the picture. Sanji leaned down so he could get a better look, and then jumped back with a wail of horror. "No, my beautiful Nami!" Sanji cried out, sinking to his knees again. "See this, Sanji," Usopp said sternly, "this is why you can't keep a girlfriend." Milo snorted. Luffy was lying on the grass, staring up at the sky with a bored expression on his face. Belmir was sprawled across his stomach and drawing on his arm. Nami had made sure it wasn't a permanent marker, as it took Zoro several days to remove his from his forehead. Kuina was still avoiding him, but the adults of the crew could tell he had given up. He cared a lot about his daughter, even if he didn't seem to show it. "I want to find Sanji," Luffy groaned. "His cooking is the best." "We're getting close to the red line in Reverse Mountain," Nami sighed. "Just be patient. We should probably make a stop at one of these islands before we cross into East Blue. I don't know how accommodating the people there would be. And it's still a few days' sail to get to Kokoyashi and Syrup Village. I assume you want to stop at Fushia too, right?" Luffy nodded. "You can meet Dayton," he told Belmir. "I lived with her when I was younger. She looks really scary, but she loves little girls." "That makes me think she wants to eat them," Robin commented, and Belmir stopped drawing. "I don't want to get eaten. She isn't going to eat you," Nami assured. "I haven't met her before, but if she put up with Luffy and Ace while they were kids, that woman is capable of anything." Luffy laughed. Robin looked up from her book. "She seems intriguing. I really would like to meet her now." "All right," Nami said loudly a few hours later. She exited her and Luffy's cabin and spread out a map on the kitchen table. "We're here, and this island is the biggest one we're going to pass before we reach Reverse Mountain." Nami tapped the island. "We're going to come around back, like usual, and stock up on food, water, supplies, and Zoro, if you want an alcohol you have to get it yourself. We're going to be arriving in an hour, around 4. It's going to be really busy then, so we can blend in. There's also a large marine base here, but we're just going to have to be careful." "Roger," Frankie cheered, and Luff grinned. "Can I come?" Belmir asked, and Nami glanced down. "You can come with me and help me get more charts," she said. "We only had one map of East Blue, and I can't find it. I'm going to have to get more. Luffy, you and Robin are in charge of food. Take any kids you want to help carry it and cart it back to the ship. Zoro and Frankie, you are on a cola run. Please don't draw any attention to yourselves. The last thing we need to worry about is the Marines." Nami dished out the money and everyone got to work, managing the sails and adjusting their course. When the island came into view, they drew in their sails and just sailed on momentum. The marine base would be able to see the skull and crossbones on their sails from their distance. The flag was smaller and less noticeable. If they looked this way they would probably only make out the black of the flag. Frankie steered the ship around and docked in a small harbor. The wind lessened, allowing their flag to slacken and hide who they were from the people. Nami stopped Luffy from jumping down. "Your hat is too recognizable," she said sternly, crossing her arms to emphasize her point. Luffy pouted, "But it's no buts," Nami said firmly. "You can either stay on the ship with your hat, or help Robin without it." Luffy pouted, removing his hat and staring at it. Suddenly, he smiled and placed it on Belmir's head. "Take care of it for me, right?" Belmir nodded excitedly. "Aye, Captain." She gave a sloppy salute. Luffy patted her on her head. "That's my girl." Nami allowed him to jump over the rail this time, joining Robin, Tom, Blake, and Kuina, who were waiting for him on the dock. Nami had Zoro and Frankie wait until the first group was out of sight before sending them off to get cola. She herself waited the same time before she and Belmir left in search of maps. Like she had predicted, the streets were crowded. Nami kept a tight hold on Belmir's hand as she wove her way through people and finally emerged on a less busy street. "Excuse me," she said politely to an older woman sitting in front of a building. The old woman looked up with a smile. "Yes, dearie? Would you happen to know where you can buy maps around here? We just docked and realized we have no maps of East Blue." The old woman placed her book on the small table beside her chair and stood. "Yes, I do know of a place. You're lucky, miss. This is the only store that carries them. I'm closed, but I'm sure I could make an exception for you." Nami smiled in relief. "Thank you very much." The woman hobbled into the building and gestured for Nami to follow. She did, towing Belmir along with her. She followed the woman to the counter and released Belmir, who ran off to look at a large map pinned to the wall. You said you docked here. Are you the navigator on your ship? Yes, Nami said. And is that your assistant? She gestured to Belmir, who was tracing a river with the tip of her finger. Nami realized the map was one of the island. No, she's my daughter, Nami corrected. Mommy, Belmir said suddenly, what are these? Those are contour lines, Nami explained. Remember when you had to draw a map of your backyard for school, and I helped you measure how high the rock was? Belmir nodded slowly, oh yeah. And we had to draw a circle showing how big it was and write the tallness of it. Nami smiled, that's right. Those lines there show how high the mountain is. See here, Nami walked over and pointed at the top of the mountain. What's that number? Belmir squinted up at the map, 400. That means this mountain is 400 meters tall, Nami explained. That's so cool, Belmir exclaimed, going back to intently studying the map. Are you sure she's not your apprentice? The old woman said, smiling as Nami came back. She's a very bright child. Well, she does like learning, which is more than I can say about my son and husband, Nami said. She hasn't been sailing long. Only a few months. I'm hoping she takes an interest in it though. The old woman nodded before rummaging through a stack of maps sitting on a shelf. She pulled a parchment from the middle of the stack and handed it to Nami. I believe this is what you're looking for. Nami examined it. Yes, this is. Thank you very much. Belmir, could you come here for a second? Belmir reluctantly left the handing map and approached her mother. Could you hold this for me? Belmir took it, her eyes shining again as she started looking over that one. This one is smaller, she commented. Yes, it is, Nami agreed, reaching into her pocket and retrieving her coin purse. But it's a bigger area. You see this island? That's where I was born. And this one is where your father was born. We also got our first ship here. Nami pointed to all the different islands as she explained them. You're originally from East Blue? The old woman asked. Nami nodded, yeah. How much for the map? 150 berry, the woman said, but then reached under the counter and withdrew a book. And you can give this to your daughter. F took the book, the title, Navigation for Beginners printed on the front. Are you sure? Nami asked, flipping through it quickly. I have the money to pay for it? The old woman shook her head. I was once a navigator aboard a marine ship. I like it when the young ones take an interest in it. Nowadays people rely on machines to get them through the oceans. She shook her head. It's a shame. There are almost double the ships sinking due to them getting lost when the blasted machines break. That is a shame, Nami said. There are no navigation machines on my ship. I wouldn't trust them enough as my own senses. So take the book and let your daughter become a navigator. Maybe she'll work for the Marines one day. Nami smiled and handed the old woman the money. If she wants to, she can, although? The woman inquired. I'm a pirate, Nami admitted. And so is her father. I don't think Belmir's going to be a Marine with her heritage. You're a pirate? The old woman said, examining Nami. You don't look like one. I know, Nami laughed, we're not really the conventional pirates. But I do have a bounty. Yeah, Belmir huffed. Mommy has one, Daddy has one, Milo has one, and I don't, it's not fair. Bella, Nami sighed, you're 12. I didn't get mine until I was 17. Your father didn't get his first bounty until he was 17. Milo is almost 17. You have to be patient. She turned back to the old woman, sorry about that. If you want, I can still pay for the book. What is your bounty? The old woman asked. Mine, Nami asked, 200 million. Is it really? The woman asked. You look delicate. I find it hard to believe. I can assure you I'm not delicate, Nami said, taking the map and handing Belmir the book. Although I do have one of the lowest bounties in my crew. The old woman shook her head, honestly, young people and pirates. Aren't there any who want to become Marines? There was the pirate era after Gold Roger died, and then that war over Fire Fist. Then the second pirate king's death, and his apparent resurrection. So many pirates, it's a shame. I've been a pirate since I was 17, Nami said. It would be hard to abandon the lifestyle now. I suppose you're right. The old woman sighed. I was raised as a Marine, so that's what I'll be until the day I die. Ace shouldn't have died, Nami commented, leaning against a shelf. Fire Fist was the son of Gold Roger, the woman said. That doesn't mean he's like him, Nami said. Ace was a good man. You knew him? The old woman asked, sounding surprised. Yeah. I met him while my crew was in Alabasta. He's very polite. And the whole thing about him being the incarnation of Roger is bullshit. Ace never knew the man. In fact, he hated him. That's what Luffy told me. Anyway, he loved Whitebeard. Luffy? As in Straw Hat Luffy? The old woman's voice rose a few pitches. You knew him too? Nami shook her head. Not knew. The woman let out a relieved breath. I know him. The old woman sputtered slightly. He's dead. No, he's not. He went off the radar to raise his kids. Nami gestured for Belmir to come over. Children? Most of the Straw Hat pirates have kids now, or so I'm told. I met Zoro's daughter, and Robin and Frankie's boys. Nami placed a hand on Luffy's hat and pulled it off Belmir's head. Then there are Luffy's kids. The old woman seemed to recognize the hat. Then she made the connection. That's Straw Hat Luffy's hat, isn't it? Nami nodded. This is my daughter, Monkey D. Belmir. I'm Nami, the navigator of the Straw Hat Pirates. The woman leaned back in her chair. So those rumors are true. You really are alive. And kicking. Once we find Sanji, that will become quite literal. Nami smiled. We just came to this island to resupply, so you don't have to worry about us plundering or anything. The old woman just shook her head. I wasn't worried about that. In all honesty, your crew seems quite respectful. I might have alerted the Marines should I still have been part of them, but she shook her head again and gave Belmir a smile. If what you say about Fire Fist is true, then this child is innocent, despite the blood she carries in her veins. Well, she's the great-granddaughter of a Marine Vice Admiral, the granddaughter of the leader of the Revolutionary Army, the daughter of the Pirate King, and an official member of the Straw Hat Pirates. She likes cute things and learning. Isn't that a contrast? The old woman laughed. Quite. Keep the book, and stay out of trouble until you leave the island. I don't think I can keep that kind of promise with a captain like Luffy, Nami said. As she spoke, a loud yell could be heard echoing through the streets. In fact, I think we should probably start running. Then go, the old woman said. You don't seem like a bad person, Miss Nami. Maybe the way Marines look at pirates is wrong. Oh, no, Nami shook her head. Pirates are vicious, bloodthirsty, and will kill their allies without a second thought. But we're the Straw Hat Pirates. We don't really consider ourselves pirates. We're more like adventurers. More like a family. She waved over her shoulder as she left the shop. Belmir's hand clutched tightly in hers again. A wave of Marines ran by, startling the pair. She started running in the opposite direction, taking a shortcut to the harbor while Belmir held on tight to her book and laughed. She reached the ship, noting that the only person not aboard was Luffy. She ushered Belmir up the ladder, following close behind. Once she was up, she had everyone set sail, and they were halfway across the small bay when Luffy made it to the docks, a crowd of Marines behind him. Even from this distance, Nami could see his smile. She grabbed the railing with one hand and reached out with the other, shouting his name to get his attention. Luffy looked up and saw her, stretching his arm and grabbing her hand. As soon as everyone was safely aboard, they dropped their sails and allowed the wind to unfurl them. There was shouting from the dock as they realized who they were chasing. Nami grinned as Luffy pulled a face back at them. Well, should we set sail for Reverse Mountain? She asked. Yes. Luffy shouted. Let's get back the rest of our crew. Nami lay on her and Luffy's shared bed, her face buried in the pillow. She felt the bed dip slightly as Luffy sat beside her, and his warm hand on her back. Are you all right? He asked. Nami rolled over onto her back, regretting it when Luffy removed his hand. I'm just getting used to being back, she said, sitting up and moving closer. I'm worried about Milo, too. I know he's in good hands, but he wasn't raised here. He doesn't really have the same drive we do, Luffy finished. Nami nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder. Luffy wrapped his arms around her and pulled her closer, resting his chin on the top of her head and brushing his fingers through her hair. He never faced the extremes we did when we were his age. He was raised in paradise compared to us. Nami pressed her face into his chest, her hand coming up to rest on his scar. And Belmir is only 12, Luffy added. She's the child of the Pirate King. They both are. That puts them in a lot of danger. Gramps said he's met Milo, and that scares me. If the Marines find out who he is, he shook his head. More and more people believe that you're back, Nami mumbled. And they know we have kids aboard. If they decide to attack us, we have to defend them as well as fight. Belmir loves fighting, but I don't think she can handle the kind of stuff we get into. We're pirates, Luffy said. And because we are, so are they. It's like the government and Ace. He was doomed the moment everyone found out who his father was. His hands tightened slightly. And me with my own father. The Marines are obsessives with wiping out the bloodlines of people they don't like. And they don't like the Straw Hat Pirates, Nami added. I don't want our kids to be a part of that. It's already too late for Milo, Luffy sighed. He's got a bounty. Milo the prince. It's not going to take people long to figure out we're related. Nami took a deep breath, but I don't want to go back to New York, either. We have to make a decision soon, Luffy. About our future. About the kids. I know, Luffy murmured into her hair. She sat back, entangling herself from Luffy's arms. Abruptly, she leaned forward and kissed him, wrapping her arms around her neck. After a minute, she pulled away. But we can deal with that in the morning, she said, standing and turning off the light before crawling under the sheets beside her husband. We'll work something out. We always do. They awoke the next morning to someone pounding furiously on their door. Wake the hell up, Zoro shouted, slamming his fist into the wood again. Luffy jumped up and threw on a pair of shorts, Nami doing the same, but putting on a shirt before they burst through the door. What is it? Luffy demanded, as Zoro spun on his heel and sprinted outside. The two followed, and as soon as they were on deck, they saw the reason they had been woken up. An island could be seen not too far away. It looked ordinary, and large enough that Nami's log pose had locked onto it. It was lucky they had an eternal pose to Whiskey Peak, because the strange light that had taken Luffy and Nami from this world, and given them back, was hovering above the island and slowly descending. Were there people on that island? Robin asked, and Nami shrugged helplessly. The crew continued staring until the island had been swallowed up and the light vanished. That was a lot bigger, Nami whispered, much bigger than the school. Usopp ended up inviting Marco, Milo, and a few of his crewmates to his house, silently hoping Milo didn't eat as much as his father. Most of the crew had wandered off, exploring the town. Sanji sulked, dragging his feet and kicking up dust as he trailed behind them and muttering. Milo, who was closest to him, heard his mother's name a few times, along with the name, Robin. Haruta patted Milo on the back. Ignore him. He's a womanizer and a jerk. It's just really creepy to hear him saying Mom's name like that, Milo said. I've never even heard Dad do that. A shudder ran through Sanji's body. Please don't mention that fact, he whimpered, and Milo turned away. Well, if you were loyal to girls, you wouldn't be in this mess, Haruta snapped, her hand on her sword as she glared. Please calm down, Usopp said. The people here aren't used to pirates. I don't think they can handle you guys. Milo snorted, knowing how true that was. From what he had seen, these men were virtually harmless, more parties and fun. But he hadn't been with them long. Definitely not long enough to see any real fights. He knew they were powerful, that was for sure. With all the devil fruit users they had aboard, and the sheer size of others. But he himself had never seen them in a serious fight. He was curious, certainly. But his gut was telling him it was better off not getting involved, to stay safe. At the same time, he was glad he was on their good side. He was practically defenseless, barely knowing how to fight using the weapon Marco gave him. It made him feel useless. Marco was strong, and claimed that Luffy was even stronger. That scared Milo. He had always looked up to his father, wanting to be just like him. But now that he knew the truth, that goal would be even harder to achieve now. His thoughts were interrupted when he heard a shout, and watched as a small blur crashed into Usopp's legs. He smiled when he realized it was a kid, most likely his. It reminded him of Belmir. Another one rounded a corner of the large house up the hill and was waving merrily at the group. Dad. The girl who had joined them looked up shyly, smiling brightly at her father. Are these your friends, Daddy? She asked. Are they pirates? Hey, I know you. She looked to Milo as she said this. I haven't been here before, Milo said, as the girl reached out and touched his hand. But I saw your face. It was with those posters in the mail, she said, jerking back as Milo moved. A wanted poster? Marco asked, and Usopp shrugged. You're a pirate too? The girl asked Milo, who hesitated and then nodded. I suppose I am. He answered, and the girl held out her hand again before latching onto his arm. That's so cool, I want to be a pirate. Do y'all think I can do it? She grinned up at him. Now Mary, Usopp chided. I don't mind, Milo said. I have a little sister. Your name's Mary? She nodded. I'm Milo. Yeah, she said. I remember now. Your poster said Milo the Prince. Are you a prince? Of what country? Are you rich? Milo blinked as he was bombarded with questions, and Usopp came to his rescue. He's the Pirate King's son, Usopp told his daughter, who lit up even more. Really? Milo laughed as Mary started dragging him up the hill, heading towards the large house. Be careful, Usopp shouted. Don't do anything reckless. Milo's pretty responsible, Marco said as Milo and Mary vanished behind the house. Don't worry about them. Alright, Usopp said, leading them up to the house. Kaya greeted them, ushering them into the living room. So, tell me about Milo. The kid? Marco said, he's not what I pictured as Luffy's kid, but he is telling the truth. Marco shrugged. He's showing a lot of potential, so I'm hoping he can learn how to use a weapon. I've given him a pole, but he hasn't named it yet. It's going to be a while until he thinks himself strong, but I'm sure he could do it. Well, considering his parentage, I really wouldn't doubt it. He seems really stubborn, Sanji said, following Kaya into the room and carrying a tray of food. He placed it on the table and took a seat. He reminds me of Ace, Marco admitted, looking out the window. Brandon was brandishing a wooden sword and hit Milo in the shin. Milo pretended to fall over, dying dramatically, to the children's delight. So is he part of your crew? Usopp asked, changing the subject. Marco shook his head, not yet. Like I said, he's really stubborn. We actually didn't find out his parentage until, well, last week. Usopp coughed. You mean he didn't tell you? Doesn't he know you and Luffy are friends? Well, Marco said. You see, the reason we're in East Blue right now is because we were pulled into another world. Sanji laughed. You're sounding like Usopp. I'm not lying, Marco said. Milo claims to be from that world. There was a huge flash of light, and suddenly, we weren't in the Grand Line anymore. There was an enormous island, with very tall buildings and strange technology. Milo seemed used to it. I think he spent his entire life there, which would mean Luffy and Nami spent that time there too. A white light? Sanji questioned. Is that what you saw when? Yeah. Bright, and a ring seemed to descend over them. When the light subsided, they were gone, Sanji said. Namur nodded. There was a rain, which was the source of the light. Usopp grimaced. So it's happened twice. Does that mean it'll happen again? I hope not, Marco said. The people on the other side, they don't seem too friendly. Milo didn't seem to mind them, but they don't like secrets. That's going to be an issue. There's also the fact that there aren't pirates over there. I don't know what to think of that, Sanji said, frowning. That thing Milo had, that black thing. Is that something from his world? He calls it a phone, Namur said. It is supposed to work like a transponder snail. That's stupid, Usopp said. That thing looks breakable as hell. Marco shrugged. That doesn't really matter. Right now, he wants to find his parents. I'm guessing you want to find Luffy and Nami too, right? Sanji nodded. That's right. But we were just going to stay put. They're coming this way with the Sunny. That sounds like a good plan. I'd leave Milo with you, but I'm going to be selfish. I want him in the crew. Marco said. We'll find your captain, and then I'll try to convince both of them to let Milo join us. Good luck trying to argue with Nami, Usopp said. Marco laughed, glancing at the door as it opened. Mary and Brandon ran through, jumping up onto the couch. Milo followed at a more sated pace, closing the door behind him. Hi. Gert walked through the almost empty street, the only other people belonging to the Whitebeard pirates. Surprisingly, nothing looked broken, as he had thought he would find when walking down the main street. He hoped Usopp was alright. He jumped when someone shouted, but it was just one person yelling to another. He grimaced slightly, thinking about the past encounters with famous pirates. Roronoa Zoro, the Pirate King's first mate, and now the Whitebeard pirates. And Usopp interacted with both of them. He let out a breath, turning a corner and coming face to face with the 12th Division commander, Haruta. Yo, she grinned, waving, despite their closeness. You haven't seen Marco around, have you? I need to talk to him. Like, now. I haven't seen him, Gert answered honestly. But I would try the mansion up the road. That's where Usopp lives, if you know who that is. Usopp lives in a mansion? Haruto said. I thought he was lying. Anyway, those marine ships. Did anyone in your village call them? She pointed over her shoulder. At the end of the road, the cliff was visible, and beyond that, the sea. Like she had said, there were marine ships visible on the horizon. I don't believe any of us did, Gert said, stepping out of the way. Haruto frowned and took off, heading in the direction Gert had pointed out. She knew Usopp well enough to know he lied a lot. Maybe he was telling the truth. He glanced out at the marine ships, which were steadily drawing closer. No one on the island would have called the Marines on one of the Emperors, knowing that the Marines stationed in East Blue would be slaughtered. And the pirate ship was out of sight of the regular patrols, so a scout wouldn't have reported it that fast. He placed a hand on his forehead, not able to come up with an answer. Haruto ran, bursting through the door to the mansion uninvited. Following the sound of laughter, she found her captain and a few division commanders, as well as Milo, who was standing at the back door. We have a problem, she said. There are marine ships, coming from the north. Marco was on his feet in an instant, running through the back door and transforming. He flew up and out of sight, before dropping to the ground a few minutes later. Everyone had crowded outside the second he took off. She's right. There's a fleet headed this way. We got here last night, Milo exclaimed. How could find us so fast? Who knows, Marco said. But if they're here for us, then we should probably get out of here. We can outsail them and get to Reverse Mountain. Who would call the Marines? Kaya asked. We serve pirates constantly at the harbor. Who knows, Usopp said. But I know that Marco should probably get out of here. Brandon, Mary, wait inside, alright. But I want to see Milo, Mary whined. You'll see him again when we meet up with Luffy. Alright? You'll get to meet his sister too. Now, inside. Kaya ushered them inside, telling Usopp to be careful before following herself. She came back a minute later and handed Usopp his black kabatu and mask, kissing his cheek. I'll be careful, Usopp assured, taking her hand. I promise. You'd better be, she said, jabbing him in the chest with her finger and leaving the group. Marco turned to the two other whitebeards, go round everyone up and get back to the ship. I don't want to cause a fight this close to a civilian island. Aye, they said, running down the road. Milo, stay with me. We're going to board their ship and see what they're doing here. Marco said, and Milo paled. Are you ready? No, Milo muttered, but pulled his weapon from his pocket. Usopp, Marco said. I don't know what you plan to do. If you want to help us, that's fine. But be careful. I don't want you jeopardizing your family. I'll be fine, Usopp said, holding up his mask. The Marines are terrified of the Straw Hat Pirates. If I show them one of them are here, and will defend this island. Good luck, he said, as Usopp left. Marco turned to Milo, who was gripping his pole with two hands, his knuckles turning white. They're probably going to dock, and that's when they'll see us. I don't think they're here for us, but they will be when they realize we're here. I think they're here for the light, Milo said. The government back home can track it, right? So your government might be able to track it too. That's a good point, Marco said, leading him towards the shore. If that's the case, then they must have set off last night, which would have given them the time to get here from headquarters. So, is this going to be a surprise attack? Milo asked, as they reached the edge of the cliff. The ships were less than a mile away, and Milo could see specks running around on deck. No, Marco said. If they attack us, we fight back, and I think you're right about them coming to investigate that light. See? They're aiming that way. That means they're not going to be coming in range of the harbor. Bet, he shouted, seeing one of the crew run by. Tell those guys on the ship to not set sail yet. Yes, sir. Marco turned back to watch. They're probably going to dock along these cliffs here. Marco gestured to the cliff they were standing on. It seems closest to the area. So what are we going to do? Milo asked. Just watch and wait, Marco answered. He sat down, a safe distance away from the sightline of the ships. Milo joined him, not relinquishing his hold on his weapon. How much do you know about Marines? Marco asked. Not much, Milo admitted. I don't think they're like the Navy back home. I only know what you guys told me, and what I remember from Mom and Dad's stories. Well, these ones aren't as strong as the ones in the Grand Line. But they can be formidable if you aren't prepared or underestimate them. You've met Garp, right? Milo nodded. You probably realized that he's your great-grandfather. He's the one who took Gold Roger into custody. Dad told me that he was the king of the pirates before him. So Marines, Kalo said. He made them seem so weak in his stories. That's because your father is one of the strongest people in the world, Marco said, glancing over his shoulder as he heard footsteps. Haruta, what's wrong? They sent out a scout ship, Haruta said. They've seen us. Damn it, Marco cursed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a baby transponder snail. Tossing it to Milo, he said, keep watching that ship. If anything happens, call me. He followed Haruta back into the empty town. What? Milo exclaimed after him, before swallowing hard and looking over the edge of the small cliff. The marine ships were getting ready to dock, the sails sporting the marine logo and a large VP. He bit his lip, inching back. VP. His father had mentioned that before, apparently a marine mad scientist. Unfortunately, he couldn't remember the name. He waited a few more minutes, leaning over again to observe. This time, he made eye contact with a person, who was over halfway up the cliff. The marine gave a shout, alerting the others on the ship. Milo swore, scrambling back and reaching for the transponder snail. He paused, looking at it. Should he warn Marco? They were just East Blue Marines, and apparently weak compared to the Grand Line, and even the other seas. Calling for help might just make him seem cowardly. Milo saw a hand appear over the cliff, and a bundle of rope was tossed over the side. Milo scrambled back, ducking behind the bushes of the nearest house. It wasn't the best hiding spot, but it did give him time to think. Should he attack them himself? But Marco warned him not to underestimate them. Milo had almost no fighting skills, mostly relying on swinging his pole around and hoping it hit the enemies. And he always had people to back him up if he got in trouble. He stared at the snail, who looked peaceful as it slept. I swear I saw someone, he heard someone say, and he carefully pushed away a branch to see what was going on. The marine had climbed up, and had tied the rope to a nearby tree, the other end hanging over the cliff edge. More marines had joined the first, and were looking around the area. "Ya sure you aren't seeing things?" another asked. "'Cause I can't see anyone." "I'm sure," the first insisted. "He looked over the edge and I saw him." "He might just be one of the locals," the second one said. "But the Whitebeards are here," the first said, "and I can't see a single person in town. The locals are probably dead." The Marines thought they had killed everyone? Milo frowned, shifting slightly to get a better view. Maybe the Marines were really biased. He had only met Gadding and Figs, and they had threatened his sister. But he didn't know all Marines were like that. Garp seemed pretty okay, but he had said they were acting. Milo made a decision, his mind screaming at him that it was stupid. He stood up. "We didn't kill anyone," he said loudly, and the Marines grouped all turned to stare at him. Milo's hands trembled as he held up his weapon defensively. "Dad was right, you're all biased and stupid." "Who are you, brat?" a third Marine asked, grinning. "See?" the first said, "I told you I wasn't seeing things." The third noticed the transponder snail at Milo's feet, noting the white mustache it sported. "He's a Whitebeard pirate." "What?" the fourth exclaimed, and Milo's hands tightened. Milo didn't deny it, knowing that if they thought he was with them, they wouldn't dare to kill him. "So?" Milo asked. "What are you going to do? If you're here for that light, then you have no reason to be on the island." "You know about that?" the second said slowly. Milo set his mouth in a thin line, but the Marines got their answer. "He knows about the light," the first Marine said. "Do you know about the project too?" he demanded. "Project? You idiot," Fore slapped the back of one's head. "We have to get rid of him now. Vegapunk will kill us." "But if we kill him, Marco's gonna kill us," the third pointed out. Milo took a step back, tensing his legs and getting ready to run. He knocked over the transponder snail, the receiver falling off the shell. The snail's eyes snapped open, and he began emitting a low hum. "We still have to take him in," the second one said, grinning and stalking forward. Milo took off, running down the road. He didn't get far. The Marines were faster, despite the adrenaline running through Milo's body. One of them tackled Milo to the ground, kicking up dirt as they rolled. Milo's pole clattered to the ground. He managed to elbow the Marine in the face, and warm liquid dripped onto Milo's arm. Twisting around to try and get in another hit, Milo realized he had broken the Marine's nose. He drew an arm back, but the Marine caught his wrist and pinned it at his side. Milo thrashed, kicking his legs and trying to free his trapped limbs. Another Marine hauled Milo to his feet, holding his hands behind him with an iron grip. Despite Milo's struggling, he wasn't able to free himself as he was led back to the cliff. The Marine holding him threw the teenager over his shoulder and climbed down. There weren't many people aboard the ship, and Milo was shoved forward once they hit the deck. Panic started building as Milo was dragged into the ship. "Where do y'all want to keep him? This is a research vessel. We don't have a brig." "Put him in one of the storage rooms," one said. "Just make sure it isn't one of the ones carrying Vegapunk's devil fruits." "Alright." Milo was dragged down another hall and shoved unceremoniously into a room. He stumbled as the door slammed behind him. Milo let out a low curse, rubbing his wrists. A little light shone through a tiny porthole on the far wall, and he stood, examining the small room. Several crates were stacked against the walls, but apart from that the room was bare. He had to get out of there, before Marco realized he had been caught. He let out a breath and examined the walls. Maybe there was a weak spot. Standing near the door, he paused for a moment, hearing voices outside. He pressed his ear against a crack. "Apparently this one has a bounty. That's a shame. We could have collected it. How much?" "Here's the poster. Milo the Prince, 20 million. That's pretty high for the East Blue, although Straw Hat still holds that record. He didn't get it in the East Blue. Says here it was in the Grand Line." "That kid's been to the Grand Line." Milo pulled away as the voices started to fade, not wanting to hear any more. The walls seemed sturdy, so he turned to the crates. He tried to pry one of them open, but they were secured tightly. He gave up, sitting on it. He stared out the window, hoping Marco would find him, or even one of the division commanders. Suddenly, a thought came to him. The wood was sturdy, but it was full of cracks. If he could pry the planks apart, he hopped off the crate and approached the window, tearing off a piece of his shirt and wrapping it around his knuckles. Glancing at the door one more time, he drove his fist through the window. It shattered and Milo caught a large piece before it fell into the water below, wincing as a sharp edge gouged a gash on his palm. He unwound the cloth and wrapped it around the cut, approaching the door again. Kneeling, he peered through the large gap he found, peering through to make sure the coast was clear before inserting the piece into the gap. He maneuvered it around a bit before getting lucky and finding a weak patch. He carved the wood until he made a hole big enough to fit a few fingers through. He carefully placed the glass on the ground beside him and shoved his fingers in and pulling back. The wood cracked near the bottom of the plank, and Milo tore the piece out. Now he could fit his entire arm through the gap, and he did so, fumbling around until he found the door and unlocked it. Creeping out quietly, he strained his ears and listened for footsteps. Hearing none, he turned another corner and paused. The Marines had mentioned devil fruits on the ship. Marco had one, and so did his father, and both of them were really strong. He spocking it and slipping through. He placed his sweater on the floor to keep the door from closing fully and locking him in before looking around. Like the room he was in, this one was full of crates. The difference here, though, was that there were several glass cases chained to the walls, displaying a variety of strange fruits. Were these the devil fruits? He reached the first case when he heard footsteps, and he ducked behind the case. The footsteps faded a few moments later, and he stood again. Lifting the glass, he waited for an alarm to start blaring, but nothing happened. Did they even have alarms in this world? He hoped not. The fruit in front of him looked about the size of a large apple, and he couldn't place the shape of it. The orange rind had strange swirls, and a green stem. It certainly looked unnatural. He heard voices behind him, and panicked. Grabbing his sweater on his way out, he didn't bother to replace the fruit as he ran in the opposite direction. He came to an exit, peering out in both directions before running out. The ship looked empty, and he guessed it was because of the missing dories and longboats. Glancing out over the water, he saw them gathered a distance away. Now was his chance to get off the ship. Walking around the mast, he froze and ducked back behind it. Apparently not all the Marines had left, and they were in his way. Looking down at the fruit in his hand, he debated eating it. He knew a lot about devil fruits, as long as they were the same ones in the stories his parents told. He looked up when he heard a noise, coming face to face with Marine Fore, the one who caught him. Shit. I'd say you're right, brat, Fore said stiffly, reaching to grab Milo. Milo ducked under his arm and sprinted down the deck, skidding to a halt as another Marine appeared from the upper deck. He spun wildly, but he was surrounded. He looked down at his sweater, the devil fruit wrapped securely in it. Deciding to screw it all, he yanked it out and took a bite. Milo nearly spat out the mouthful, the bitter taste making him gag. He forced it down, wincing. A Marine swiped a sword at him, and Milo leaned back. It nicked him though, the tip catching his left temple. It stung, but he paid it no mind as another sword was aimed in his direction. He ducked under it this time, and took another large bite of the fruit. He shuddered as it slid down his throat, and the fourth bite finished it. He noted quickly that there were no seeds or a pit. He dropped his hand and sprinted through the two Marines and to the side of the ship. The cliff was still in reach, but the rope was gone. He didn't feel any different after eating the fruit, and he briefly wondered if he was supposed to feel weird. He turned back around, where the three Marines were advancing. "Watch, I am," Marine Fore warned. "The little shit just ate a devil fruit. I dunno how dangerous new users can be." He looked at the Marine beside him. "Go find out which one he ate." The Marine ran off, leaving Milo facing the two Marines left. He started to reach for his pole, but his pocket was empty, and he remembered dropping it on the road. He held up his fists instead, trying to imitate the stance he had seen Jozu use while fighting. As his breathing calmed down, the thrill of eating a devil fruit wearing off, he began to feel his injuries. His temple throbbed, and he could now feel the warm and sticky liquid clinging to the side of his face. His hand hurt as he clenched his fists. Surprisingly, he hadn't irritated the gash yet. He was sure the action would have reopened the thin scab that had formed. He knew it wouldn't have healed too much in the short time he had it. He felt his knees trembling as he stared down his opponents. One held a sword, and the other carried a gun, both deadly. "Vegapunk's gonna kill us," the gun wielder said. "I know," the swordsman said, "but we need to catch him. If we bring him to Vegapunk, we won't have to worry about finding a human test subject. Maybe he'll be merciful." Milo swallowed convulsively at the phrase, "human test subject," and he tasted the remaining bitterness of the fruit on his tongue. He glanced quickly over his shoulder at the cliff, trying to determine the distance between the railing and the nearest ledge. "So catch him alive then," the gun wielder summarized, and the swordsman nodded. "If we don't want Vegapunk to kill us, we bring him a test subject." By now, the throbbing in Milo's temple had subsided, but he could feel the crusted blood when he moved his head. His hand had stopped hurting as well, and when he opened his hand to reveal his palm, he could only gape in surprise. There was blood covering his hand, and soaked through the cloth, but when he pulled the bloody bandage away, there was nothing but a thin pink line of scar tissue. No open wound. Was the rapid healing a result of the devil fruit? He knew Marco could instantly regenerate, but he also knew that Jozu couldn't. As he stared at his hand, heat started spreading through his limbs, the rush of power surprising him. Now he was feeling something. He curled his hand into a fist again and allowed a cocky grin to spread over his face. "You look awfully confident," the swordsman said. "Do I?" Milo asked, taking a casual step forward, barely able to keep away the trembling. "Well, this is my first time fighting alone." "Oh well. Mom always told me to try new things." The Marine with the gun laughed. "You still listen to your mommy?" Milo narrowed his eyes at the mockery. "Well, considering she's strong enough to kick your ass, yes. I wouldn't want to get on her bad side." "Is she here?" the swordsman asked, because if she is, he lunged forward, his sword whipping forward with him. "I'm going to show her how weak her child is." There was no resistance as the blade pierced through Milo's stomach, and the Marine grinned in triumph. "Get a medical kit ready," he ordered. "We need to bring him in alive." Milo stood still, his limbs locked and his eyes shut tight as he waited for the pain to start. He had never been stabbed before, but had read enough books to know what being stabbed was supposed to feel like. After a moment he opened his eyes, almost expecting to see the sword hovering in front of him. But when he looked down, he saw the hilt protruding from his stomach. He had been stabbed, but he wasn't feeling anything. No, he wasn't feeling any pain. A strange heat had flared up around the entry point. It wasn't a harsh burning, it almost felt pleasant. At the same time, the third Marine returned, a look of horror on his face. Vegapunk's personal collection. He shrieked. He took one of the real ones, not a synthetic. The swordsman seemed to realize his weapon had no effect on the teenager. Milo stepped backwards, off the sword. A tingling sensation started up in his abdomen, and he felt the skin and organs start to knit themselves back together. He ate the flame fruit. The one Doflamingo gave Vegapunk. He's a logia. Get the sea prism stone, the swordsman spat, glaring at Milo. Milo suddenly felt self-conscious with all the eyes on him. He averted his eyes and tugged at the hole in his shirt. Whatever fruit he had eaten made him impervious to any kind of weapon. Logia. That's what the Marine had said. According to his parents' stories, the captain's brother, his uncle, had the ability of a logia devil fruit. He was able to turn his body to fire. And the Marine had said, Milo brought his hand up in front of him, and willed his fingertips to light. He felt heat spread from his core and up his arm, stopping at his hand. His fingertips began to glow a dark orange and started to spark. It was enlightening and gave him a new hope. With this new ability, maybe he would be able to catch up with his father. He was distracted from his thoughts when the sword-carrying Marine's fist crashed into his cheek and sent him crashing into the ship's railing. What? Milo began, grabbing his cheek with one hand and the railing with the other. He leaned on IR for support as pain seared in his cheek. You obviously aren't very smart, the Marine said. Don't think you're invincible just because you've eaten a logia model devil fruit. Haven't you ever heard of hockey? Milo glared. But the word started ringing bells in his head. It sounded familiar. We can't let you go, the Marine continued. You see, that devil fruit you just ate was really hard to get a hold of. It belonged to a member of your crew, Firefist Ace. I know who Ace was, Milo said. Then you know how much of a demon he was. The Marine said. The son of the devil himself. Son of the first pirate king. I've heard two very different accounts from other people. Milo bit out. His cheek felt like it was bruising. Well, of course Marco would talk positively. Thing is though, Marco's a demon too. The Marine snorted. Who's the second? My parents. Milo said. They speak highly of him. The Marine laughed. Your parents must have been terrible pirates to look up to someone like that. Milo clenched his fists as the insult and leapt forward. He hit the Marine's face, snapping his head back sharply. The Marine shouted in pain, his broken nose going through more abuse. Milo didn't stop, crouching and whipping his leg out, catching his opponent's legs and sending him crashing to the deck. The other Marine shot a few bullets in Milo's direction, the majority of them missing. The few that hit Milo passed through his body and left no lasting damage. Damn it, the Marine cursed, reloading. Milo aimed a kick in his direction, but he dodged it and let a few more shots fire. One grazed Milo's exposed arm, and Milo watched in fascination as the groove in his arm turned orange and sealed itself up. Footsteps behind Milo alerted him that the swordsman was back on his feet. He made no move as the blade was driven through his shoulder. He felt the flames flare up again, healing his skin constantly. He laughed. But less than a second later he felt something cold clamp onto his wrist, and then the heat turned to pain. He clamped a hand below the blade, and felt warm blood. Slowly, his mind turning hazy with pain, he turned his eyes to his shoulder. The blade was tipped with red blood. His blood. And it was dripping down his arm and soaking his shirt. On his wrist was a metal cuff. But it wasn't metal, it looked and felt like stone. The blade was torn from his body, Milo shouting in pain as it left. He tried to focus and find the healing flames, but there was nothing. He collapsed, falling to his knees and bracing himself with his uninjured arm. The tip of the blade was pressed to Milo's neck, and he stiffened. You're just in time, the swordsman said, and Milo noticed that the third Marine had returned. A boot crashed into Milo's head, sending him sprawling face first onto the deck. He gasped sharply, and then felt his arms being pulled behind him. He bit his tongue to keep from crying out as his newest injury was aggravated. The cuff was attached to his other wrist. Milo tried to struggle, but he couldn't find the strength to do it. As soon as the shackles were secured he was lifted and set on his feet. He tried to take a step, but his limbs felt heavy and useless. I am at the bottom of the ship, he heard one of the Marines say. And make sure he doesn't escape this time." He groaned in pain as he was manhandled again, slung over someone's shoulder. He felt them descend stairs, and the light dimmed. A few more flights of stairs and then the walking evened out. He felt them stop, and then heard a door click open. Blood rushed to his head as he was forced to his feet, and then shoved roughly inside the small room. He landed hard on his back and hands. The door slammed shut, leaving Milo in complete darkness. No porthole this time. He rolled onto his uninjured side in an attempt to get more comfortable. His injuries throbbed, sending pain through his body. As he closed his eyes, trying to calm down, he regretted not calling Marco for help when he had the chance. Marco had warded off the scout ship, and after scaring it off, both ships had left in a hurry. He frowned, looking around. Usopp appeared beside him, pushing up his mask and letting it rest on his head. "Do you have any idea what scared them off? I went to the cliffs but they were leaving when I got there." Marco shook his head. "I have no idea. Maybe it was us." Usopp didn't answer, looking behind him when he heard footsteps. "Gert, what are you doing here?" "The townspeople wanted to know what was going on," Gert said, giving Marco a wary look. "So I volunteered. Kaya and your children never went to the safe house. Are they all right? I don't think you realize how dangerous these pirates are." "Kaya and the kids are fine," Usopp said. "I'd be more worried about the Marines right now." Gert glanced at Marco again, but Usopp ignored him, turning to Marco. "You said that they were here for the light, right? What do you think they're planning?" "Maybe they're just studying it," Marco said, although he sounded hesitant when he said it. "It is a mysterious phenomenon." Milo said that the people on the other side were studying it too. "I think there's more to it," Usopp said. "Whatever's going on, it's been happening for almost 17 years. Luffy and Nami were the first people I know that were affected by it, but there could be more." Marco's frown deepened. A scientist on the other side said something about the two worlds fusing. He seemed pretty distressed. "The technology over there seems more advanced too, so I can only assume they know more about this than we do." Running a hand through his hair, Marco let out a frustrated sigh. "Well, Milo got pretty close with those scientists. He probably knows more about it than we do." "Then we should find and ask him," Usopp said. He glanced around. "Is he here?" "He's by the cliff. I told him to keep a watch out for any strange marine activity and then report back to me." "Has he?" Marcy shook his head. "Not yet." Usopp turned around, ignoring Gert. "Then he's probably still at the cliff. I can go get him if you want." "That would be great," Marco said. "I need to deal with some stuff here." Usopp nodded and started walking. Gert followed him, not fancying the idea of staying with one of the emperors. "Usopp, why are you friends with that pirate?" "Because our crews formed an alliance," Usopp said simply, as they turned a corner. "Can you just drop it? None of you guys believe me. And I really don't feel like getting mocked. He's my friend. Leave it at that." "But Usopp," I said, "drop it." Usopp snapped. Gert closed his mouth with a snap, and Usopp pinched the bridge of his nose. "I put up with years of mockery, and quite frankly, I'm getting sick of it. I'm a pirate, alright? Just stop." Gert nodded, slightly fearful of Usopp's expression. He looked murderous. He had never seen the man look like that before, and it scared him slightly. He knew Usopp when he was just a child, spitting out lies like there was no tomorrow. And even as an adult, what he said sounded insane. People might have believed he was a pirate if he had just been honest. But singing skeletons, giant whales, Nico Robin, an island in the sky, the Florian Triangle, and the Pirate King, it was just too much to believe, especially for a small town boy with a reputation for lying. Usopp started moving again, and they walked in silence. As they reached the road leading to the cliff, Usopp froze, and then sprinted forward. Gert followed, coming up behind Usopp as he knelt to the ground and picked up something silver. "What is that?" "It's Milo's," Usopp answered. He tucked it into his belt beside the black kabato and ran forward again. They both reached the cliff, and Usopp scanned the area quickly, finding the baby transponder snail on its side. He picked it up and replaced the receiver, the small creature's eyes falling shut. "And this belongs to him too." He tucked it into his pocket, letting it rest before using it again. He walked to the edge of the cliff and watched the small fleet of ships sail away. "He's not here." Where would a pirate go? He's not really a pirate. Just traveling with them. And I don't know him very well, so I don't know where he could have gone. He pulled the transponder snail out and lifted the receiver. Marco? Usopp. I found Milo's pole and transponder snail, but I don't see Milo, Usopp said. Shit, Marco growled, the snail taking on an angry expression. Stay there. I'll be over in a few minutes. Marco searched the area once he arrived, cursing the entire time. He didn't turn up. A few hours later the crew had turned up the entire island, finding the safe house and passing by it without a thought. Everyone reported negatively to Marco, and he ground his teeth in frustration. Damn it. Where could he have gone? Usopp swallowed, looking nervous. What if he's not on the island? Why wouldn't he be? The Marines might have taken him, Usopp said, watching Marco for a reaction. Marco's fists clenched and his face started turning red. Blue lanes flickered across his knuckles and shoulders. Gert cowered behind Usopp at the Phoenix's rage. Get back, Gert hissed at Usopp. He's mad. He won't hurt innocent people. Usopp hissed back, watching as Marco calmed down. If we hurry we can catch the ships, Marco said. Prepare to set sail, now. Haruto looked nervous. That's impossible. It's been 3 hours. They've gotten too far for our ship to catch up. Fire flared up again, and Marco's expression turned deadly. Gert backed up, and Usopp sighed. Luffy's not going to be happy. His son was captured by the Marines, Marco spat. Of course he's not going to be happy. It'll be Ace all over again. I'm just glad that not many people know his parentage. If he keeps quiet, he won't be executed. But if he's Luffy's kid, Usopp pointed out. Marco smiled grimly. He acts more like Nami, without her obsession with money. He turned to Namur. Can you inform navigation that we're going to be staying in East Blue for a while? We need to track down those ships. Namur nodded and head, and Usopp followed Marco as he headed down too. Most of the crew had boarded and were readying the ship for sailing. Usopp, I'm going to take responsibility for Milo's capture. Wait here for Luffy, and tell him what happened, alright? Usopp nodded. I will. Be careful, alright? I'll keep you informed if I hear anything about him. Thank you. Hopefully, we'll see each other again soon. Usopp smiled, waving as the ship left the harbor and started sailing away. He turned around and started walking up the road, and Gert stared after him. They didn't do anything to the town, he said. No, he didn't. Usopp said, he wouldn't. Sanji, where the hell have you been? The blonde blinked a few times. Helping Kaya clean up. You can't expect a lovely lady to do that by herself. What did I miss? Usopp slammed his palm to his face and groaned. I see Reverse Mountain, Luffy shouted, drawing happy shouts from below. The kids ran to the railing to get a glimpse of it. None of them had seen it before. Luffy jumped down, landing beside Nami, who was fishing a spyglass from a box she had pulled out of the storage room. Daddy, Belmere shouted, jumping onto his back. I can't see it yet. Can't you? Luffy asked, as she locked her arms around her neck. We need to go higher then. He stretched his arm and grabbed the top of the lookout tower. Belmere laughed as they shot up and Nami shouted at them to be careful and tossed up a spyglass. See if you can spot Crocus. Belmere saluted as Luffy caught the spyglass and handed it to Belmere. She put it to her eye and Luffy showed her how to focus it. Once she had done that and began scanning the horizon. That's a weird man, she said. Strange man? Luffy asked. He's all white, and has really big hair. Can I see that? Luffy asked, and Belmere handed over the spyglass. He placed it to his eye and found Reverse Mountain. Hey, it's Brook, guys, I see Brook. The ship arrived at the mountain, and Brook looked ecstatic to see them. Aw, my friends, I heard of your return. It fills my heart with happiness that you would come find me, even if I do not have a heart. Yo-ho-ho. Belmere stared at the skeleton and then laughed. You're a funny skeleton. It warms me to hear you say that, young miss. I'm Belmere. I am Brook, musician of the Straw Hat Pirates. Belmere clapped her hands together excitedly and smiled. You're cool. Are you coming with us? That's right, Nami said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Kuina was circling the 8-foot-tall skeleton, inspecting him. Brook jumped when Kuina poked his backside with her sword. Tom looked curious and Blake stayed close to Robin. Chopper laughed as Brook jumped again, the sword poked through his ribs, emerging in front of him. It's been a while, Brook. can you song us a song? Brook whipped out his violin. Certainly, it does get lonely playing only for myself and Laboon. Who's Laboon? Blake asked, his curiosity outweighing his shyness. Frankie smiled. A whale. A whale? Kuina asked, not sounding impressed. Zoro laughed. A whale that ate us the first time we crossed Reverse Mountain. Ate you? Belmere exclaimed, looking between her parents. Luffy laughed. It ate the Mary. Kuina turned to her father with a skeptical expression. It ate your ship? That's right, Nami said, answering for Zoro. Is he nearby, Brook? I don't think they understand his size. Brook laughed and started playing a melody on his violin. A few minutes later, the surface of the water started frothing. Then, a mountain rose out of the water. Those who hadn't seen Laboon before gasped as seawater showered the group. A loud groan came from the mountain, and then it turned. An eye, as big as the sunny, turned in their direction and most of the children backed away. Belmere jumped up a few times, grinning madly. It's so big, it's like a monster, so cool. We'll stay a few nights here before crossing, Nami decided. Take a break from sailing at full speed and figure out what we're going to do next. We have most of the crew now, and just need to find Usopp and Sanji. Milo's safe with Marco. We can afford to take a few days off. Are you sure it's safe with the monster? Kuina asked. Laboon will not eat you this time, Brook assured. I think we should have a party. Luffy cheered, backing up Brook. Go get the food, and the meat, damn it, Milo thought, as he slowly woke. It had been several days since he had been caught. Or what he assumed to be that. The room was constantly dark. Someone had come in shortly after his capture and treated his shoulder, and once in a while food was brought. Apart from that, there was no way to tell how much time was passing. He spent the days drifting into and out of consciousness and trying to think up ways he could escape. So far, nothing. As more time passed, he began to get frantic. He remembered the conversation he had with the Marines during the fight, and becoming an experiment didn't sound very pleasant. What would his father do? Milo had no idea. Maybe use his inhuman strength and just beat the door down. He had the use of his hands, but there were thin bands made of stone around his wrists. That was only a recent change. Apparently he was wanted alive, and if his hands were behind him his shoulder wouldn't have healed properly. He remembered hearing the medic complaining about the bands, calling them sea stone and muttering about him being energy deficient and having the wound tail longer to heal than it should have taken. Milo could still feel it, a constant throbbing in his shoulder. The strange heat he had felt after he had eaten the bitter fruit was gone, and he doubted it would be returning until the bands were removed. He ground his teeth together in frustration, turning his head sharply when the door opened. A Marine shuffled in, placed a tray on the ground, shot Milo a sympathetic glance, and left the room. Milo frowned at the Marine's strange behavior. Usually, they wouldn't even look at him. He shuffled closer, peering through the gloom, and dragged the tray closer. Thin broth, bread, and water. Nothing unusual. He ate it, slid the tray to the door, and took his usual position leaning against the far wall. The next time the door opened, there were 3 Marines standing outside. He had never seen them before, and panic rose in his chest as he realized they must have docked. One of the Marines, over 5 feet taller than Milo, stepped in and grabbed his arm, roughly dragging him to his feet. Milo stumbled slightly and then regained his footing. After some prodding, the Marines led him outside, where he stopped momentarily as the sunlight hit him. It was in the west. Almost night. Another prod and he was walking again, off of the ship, down a gangplank, and onto a dock. The dock itself was impressive, the docks looking glossy and polished. Men and women in stiff blue and white uniforms walked around, many of them turning to Milo, who stood out with his dirt-stained and torn clothing. The bands on his wrists were a giveaway too, indicating that he was a prisoner and most likely a pirate. He felt his chest heat up slightly as he was stared at. They arrived at the tall and imposing building a little bit later, and Milo was glad. His body was trembling from the strain. He was hungry and had almost no strength. He was led through the lobby, his shoes leaving grimy stains on the marble floor. They traversed through a hallway, then several more. And then a flight of stairs. Finally they stopped, and Milo almost pitched forward. He was stopped by a rough hand clapping on his shoulder and holding him upright. "You will show the utmost respect to Master Vegapunk," the Marine ordered, and Milo didn't respond. The Marine was in the middle of raising a fist to the door when it swung open inwards and revealed a man in a lab coat. Milo was immediately reminded of a mad scientist. His dark hair was graying and stuck up in different directions. His nose was pointed and his face thin. He peered down over his bird-like nose and examined Milo. "Is this the brat who ate my devil fruit?" His voice was high and pitchy. One of the escorts nodded. "He is. You said you wanted him, so we brought him here." "Excellent. What about the crew who let him eat it?" "Awaiting your punishment." Vegapunk nodded, spinning on his heel and marching into the room. Milo was jabbed again, and followed the scientist. It didn't look like a mad scientist's laboratory. It looked like an ordinary lab, similar to the ones at his high school. Vegapunk pointed at a chair, and Milo was shoved into it. Despite the circumstances, Milo was glad for the break. His legs were numb. "Now get out of here," Vegapunk ordered, addressing the Marines and pointing at the door. They saluted and left, closing it behind them. "So, boy," Milo gulped as Vegapunk addressed him directly, "you stole something of mine." Milo swallowed again, trying to formulate an answer. He ended up letting out an embarrassing squeak, and Vegapunk closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. "And you hardly seem strong. What can you do?" What can you do?" Vegapunk repeated impatiently. "You look to be 16. You're a white-beard pirate. What can you do?" "I don't know, and I'm only traveling with them." Vegapunk let out a loud sigh. "So my fruit was wasted on a brat who doesn't know anything. I was informed your parents are pirates. Is that right?" Milo nodded hesitantly. "Will they come looking for you?" "Probably," Milo answered honestly. "Are they whitebeards too?" Milo shook his head. "Well then, I don't think they pose much of a threat." He leaned forward. "But you are aware of the project. So I can't let you dilly-dally off." "I don't know what it is," Milo said quickly. "I only heard the word once. That's it, I swear." "No," Vegapunk shook his head. "You know about the other world." Milo blinked. "Is that what the project's about?" Vegapunk nodded, stepping back and started to pace. "Yes. The other world is much more advanced than this one. The technology is incredible. If I could get my hands on it," he trailed off, grinning madly. "Why tell me?" Milo asked. "Because you're here," Vegapunk said simply. He turned back and locked gazes. "And I'm curious as to how much you know. You see, several of my officers spoke to the villagers on that island. They say your ship came through it, so you've been to the other world." "Yeah, so talk," Vegapunk demanded. "I want all the information you've got." Milo stayed silent for a minute. "Why do you want their tech?" Vegapunk blinked at the question. "Because I am a scientist." "But why?" Vegapunk's eyes narrowed slightly. "You have no right to be asking me that, boy." "I have every right," Milo shot back. "If you're going to fight them or if you're going to start a war." "Shouldn't that make a pirate happy?" Vegapunk asked. "You're all into bloodshed and fighting." "I'm not a pirate," Milo snapped. "I was just labeled one because of who my parents are." "Not a pirate, but your parents are," Vegapunk said, tilting his head. "What do you call yourself then?" "How the hell should I know?" Milo asked. "It was only coincidence that we came back here, but I guess it would have happened sooner or later. The worlds are fusing, after all." Something sparked in Vegapunk's eyes. What was that last bit? Milo snorted. "You wanted information, right? Well, the worlds are fusing. That's what Taylor said anyway. People coming through on both sides. A lot of people in my world are freaking out because of that. Starting a war would be the stupidest thing anyone could do." "Your world?" Vegapunk repeated slowly, and Milo realized his wording. "Yes," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I was born there." Vegapunk stared at him for a long minute and then bounded forward, pulling Milo to his feet, grabbing a key and unlocking the bands, and shaking his hand profusely. "This is amazing," Vegapunk shouted. "Amazing. Incredible. I never thought I would meet someone from the other side. Tell me," he gushed, "what's the technology like? What government systems do they use? I want to know everything." Milo was momentarily stunned at Vegapunk's abrupt change. Well, boy," Vegapunk said, recovering and interrupting Milo. "I know you're a pirate and everything, but would you consider an offer to work with me?" His eyes were gleaming as he stared at Milo. Startled Milo, who rubbed his wrists. The raw skin was already starting to heal, and the moment the stone bands had left his skin he had felt the surge of heat flare through his body. On one condition, Milo said slowly, wondering if what he was about to do was a wise choice. It would make him stronger, if Vegapunk agreed. But he would also be safe from the Marines. Maybe he could also get a message to Marco. I want to learn how to use these powers. Vegapunk's face split into a wide smile. What's your name, boy? Milo. Well then, Milo, Vegapunk grinned, welcome. Milo shook Vegapunk's outstretched hand, wondering if he was making a mistake. The Straw Hats crossed into East Blue as soon as the flow of water changed, cheering. Brook had bid Laboon farewell, but promised to return as soon as he could. The whale didn't seem to mind their leaving as much this time. Kuina tried not to act impressed, but she had never been this route before. Her and Zoro usually took the long way around, following the base of Reverse Mountain. It was rare that the flow of water changed and allowed people to cross the mountain back into the seas. But every other child was smiling and laughing, not hiding their impressed expressions as the ship began climbing. It's moving so fast, Belmir exclaimed. It would be hard to move the rudder in this water. Nami wrapped her arm around Belmir's shoulders. That's right. That's why we needed to enter the flow completely straight. Otherwise we would crash into the side of the cliffs. Belmir nodded solemnly and then pulled away from Nami and ran to the figurehead. Luffy spotted her from his perch on the lion's head and helped her climb over and join him. The kids let out a cry of excitement as they passed through the clouds, and the sky above them turned from gray to blue. A few seconds later they reached the top of the mountain. The water lost its force in that moment, and Nami shouted the order to turn the rudder as far to the right as possible. Heading backwards up Reverse Mountain meant there were 4 possible choices to choose when descending. The path furthest to the right led to East Blue. The ship shifted sharply and turned to the right. The ship tottered precariously on the edge for half a second, and then started descending. Belmir laughed. It's like a roller coaster. What's a roller coaster? Tom shouted, but his words were blown away by the wind. The only thing that could be heard were the screams of those who had never ridden Reverse Mountain before. The plummet seemed to last forever, and then they hit the ocean with a mighty splash. There was a moment of silence as the waves stilled and the ship stopped rocking, and then a cheer went up. The kids seemed dazed, but they joined their parents soon enough. Is everyone alright? Chopper asked, looking around. Yup, Luffy laughed. We need to find Sanji first. He needs to cook us meat. Nami sighed. The Bharati is a sea restaurant. It could be anywhere in this ocean. At least Usopp is on an island. They don't float away. We were at the Bharati a few months ago, Zoro said. It wasn't very far from Syrup Village. Chopper smiled. I've always wanted to visit Syrup Village. It sounds so sweet. It isn't really, Kuina said. The people are nice enough, but it's ordinary. Chopper's face fell, and Kuina hastily added, but I'm sure Usopp could find something. His kids are sweet, sorta. That seemed to cheer Chopper up, and he went on his way. Kuina sighed in relief and Zoro laughed at her. His kids are not sweet in the least. They act like you did when you were their age. Kuina stuck her tongue out at him and grinned, running to the railing and stopping beside Tom. The waters didn't look much different from those of the Grand Line, but there was less worry in the air. The waves seemed smaller and the wind wasn't as harsh. Excitement filled the air here though, the original Straw Hat crew eagerly awaiting their arrival at Syrup Village. Especially Nami and Luffy. It had been almost 2 decades since they last saw their friends. And they had heard rumors over the past week that Marco and the Whitebeard pirates were in East Blue currently. Milo was close, and he could meet more of the crew. He had only met Kuina so far. Luffy hopped off the figurehead, landing on deck and dragging a protesting Belmir behind him. But I wanted to stay there. You can't be there by yourself, Luffy said, and then pointed at the lookout. There's a better view from up there. Can I go up there? Call us if you see anything, alright? Belmir nodded, grinning. She darted to the ladder and vanished up it. Nami looked over at Blake. Would you be willing to keep an eye on her? The boy nodded shyly, and Robin put a hand on his shoulder. I'll come join you. It's nice and quiet up there. It might not be with Bella, Nami warned, and Robin waved it off. It will be quieter than down here. Nami nodded, her friend having a point. Luffy put a hand on Nami's shoulder as Robin followed her son up the ladder. Milo's in this sea. I know, Nami said, nodding and turning around to face him. We'll catch up to Marco soon. His ship is big, so it will be easy to spot. Luffy nodded, turning his head to look out over the ocean. So far, there was no island in sight, but Nami had said earlier that the first island they would come to would be Log Town. After they had spotted that they would be able to navigate to Kokoyashi, Syrup, and Windmill villages. She had also complained about how the log pose didn't work in the seas. Let's hope so, Nami said. I've heard more rumors than just the Whitebeards. Vegapunk's been in the area too, doing something top secret for the government. Where'd you hear that? Luffy asked, and Nami sighed irritably. Reading the newspaper, she replied. You should try it sometime. You never did back in New York. It's a good thing your colleagues kept you updated. She paused for a minute. I wonder how everyone else is doing. I'm sure they're fine, Luffy said. Even if they're with the Marines, they're not people to put those who are inexperienced in danger. Like we're doing, Nami said quietly, glancing up at the lookout tower and then at the children she could see on deck. Luffy didn't say anything. He just took her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. Milo definitely regretted teaming up with Vegapunk. He had done nothing with his powers the entire 2 weeks he had been with him. It was just physical training. When he complained, Vegapunk always went on a rant, using scientific words Milo couldn't care to try and understand. But he didn't dare cross Vegapunk himself. He was the only one keeping him safe from the Marines around the base. It was well known that he was a Whitebeard pirate, even if he hadn't joined yet. No one here knew that. He often wondered what Vegapunk would do if he figured out Milo's parentage. Swallowing hard, he turned his mind back to running. He had always hated exercise, and he missed his phone and music. Despite the hard work though, Milo was learning a lot. Both about the Marines and their views on pirates, and his parents' reputations. His curiosity seemed to excite Vegapunk, because the man never hesitated to answer a question. But in fairness, Vegapunk loaded Milo with questions as well. His favorite topic was weaponry, which Milo didn't know much about. He told the scientist about the weaponized aircrafts and land-based vehicles that were used in the world wars. He seemed to like the description of the tanks. Milo also described the atomic bombs and nuclear weapons, describing their effects in detail and hoping to scare Vegapunk into giving up whatever he had planned. But if anything, it seemed to encourage him even more. The sadistic smile the man wore scared him. We'll take over that world, Vegapunk said one day, as Milo was trying to make it through a set of push-ups. That way we can have the power to eliminate all those who threaten us. The statement startled Milo enough that his arms gave out and he face-planted himself up and stared at Vegapunk with wide eyes. Don't worry, Vegapunk said, noting Milo's expression. As long as you remain loyal to us, you'll be fine. But I'm not, Milo thought, but didn't say anything out loud. He just nodded slowly and returned to his push-ups. Vegapunk continued prattling on about their tactical strategies and possible plans that had been set in motion. This man's too trusting, Milo thought. Maybe. What's the project? He asked hesitantly when he finished his set. Vegapunk narrowed his eyes dangerously. Where did you hear that? One of the Marines that captured me mentioned it, Milo told him. Vegapunk shook his head, a scowl decorating his face. Those goons can't be trusted. So what is it? Milo persisted. You don't need to know, Vegapunk said sharply, before ordering Milo to start running laps. Milo sighed as he forced himself to his feet, his arms burning. He flexed his fingers and sent a surge of heat through his arms, turning the tips of his fingers red. The exercise was helping him control the flames more, even if he hated it. He started running, not wanting to end up on Vegapunk's bad side. It was a couple of days later, when Vegapunk dragged Milo along on an expedition did something interesting happen. As the ship departed the naval base, Vegapunk showed Milo several photographs. Are these the aeroplanes that you were talking about? Those fighters? No, Milo answered, plucking the pictures from Vegapunk's fingers. This looks like a passenger aircraft, it carries people, not weapons. Vegapunk looked mildly disappointed. Shame. We could have used those weapons. Or the aeroplane itself. Airplane, Milo corrected. Were there any survivors? The plane in the picture looked relatively intact. It was missing half of its left wing and its tail, but the cabin looked undamaged. Who knows, Vegapunk said. That thing's been there for years, according to the locals. It sounded like one of your world's machines, so I thought I would investigate it. Milo grimaced and handed back the pictures, just as someone ran down from the deck and shouted, "Captain!" "What is it?" Vegapunk asked, looking irritated at the interruption. The man cast a wary glance at Milo before turning back to Vegapunk. It's here." "What is? Be specific," Vegapunk demanded. Milo frowned, glancing at the open hatch. There was a familiar buzz in the air and in his chest. "It's the light," he answered for the sailor, who nodded frantically. "What?" Vegapunk shouted, shoving past the sailor and sprinting up the stairs. Milo helped the disgruntled sailor to his feet before following the mad scientist up the stairs and into the open air. Vegapunk was frozen at the top of the stairs, staring with awe at the blinding white halo that hovered over the ship. "Captain!" someone shouted. "What do we do?" Vegapunk looked at Milo. "Well, it's impossible to outsail," Milo said, shielding his eyes from the glare and looking up at the ring. "I've tried that before. It follows you. The best thing to do is hold on, and once we're there find land. There should be a way back near New York. If we can get there, it'll be fine." "Is that what you did last time?" Vegapunk asked, as the sailors within earshot grabbed onto something stable. Milo nodded. "This will be my 4th time through. I really hope we end up in New York again." "Is that the name of your home island? Sorta?" The halo descended, and Milo grabbed the railing tightly. The ship rocked back and forth a bit as the waves were disturbed, but apart from that it was a smooth transition. Milo blinked a few times as his vision cleared, and then looked around. There was nothing but ocean around them. "Are we on the other side?" Vegapunk asked, and Milo turned to face him. "I think so. We end up in a different place each time. I just hope we're near North America." "Why would it matter where we were?" a nearby sailor asked, and Milo noted the log pose he wore. "Political reasons," Milo answered, and gestured to the log pose. "Can I see that?" When the sailor hesitated, Vegapunk snatched it from him and handed it to Milo. "Why do you need it?" "Because here, log poses point north," Milo said. "Mom's did, so I'm assuming yours will too. It just has to set, right?" "But it will only send us to the nearest island," the sailor protested. "We don't have as many islands here," Milo said. "We have continents. And our magnetic field covers the entire planet, so it will point north like a compass does. See, it's settled." The log pose had been spinning wildly before, but had slowed and stopped, pointing towards the port side. "I would bet that we're in the Atlantic Ocean. That's where my parents ended up when they came over, if their stories are true. Gaddy, or whatever his name was, his ship ended up in this ocean. And Marco's ship ended up in this ocean. I'm hoping we're just a bit further from the coast." "So where do we go?" Vegapunk asked. Milo examined the log pose, holding it in front of him. "We need to head west to get to the east coast." He pointed towards the stern. "So that way." No one moved. Vegapunk crossed his arms. "Well, what are you waiting for? Set the heading and let's head out." There was a reluctant response, but soon the ship was bustling with activity. Vegapunk turned to Milo, an unsettling grin plastered to his face. The teenager remembered his earlier words and shivered. The ship was met with motorboats, much like the last time Milo had encountered his world's police. Milo hid himself below deck, not wanting to talk. He felt when the ship began to move, hearing the water flow past the metal hull. He also heard the sailors' shouts of "land ho" when land came into view. "How many people are aboard?" a strong voice asked, and Milo peered over the hatch from his seat on the stairs. 20, Vegapunk said, looking unsure. 22 sailors and 2 passengers, a sailor supplied for him. "It's Book," Milo realized, recognizing the man. The Coast Guard looked bored as he questioned the sailors and looked around the deck. "Anything unusual we should know about? Weapons? Special passengers? Intentions?" Vegapunk shook his head as one of the sailors muttered, "A pirate." "You're carrying a prisoner?" Book asked, hearing the remark. "He's with me," Vegapunk said, shooting a glare at the man who spoke. The man backed away with a guilty look on his face. "So I'm assuming you're in charge," Book said, directing his attention back to Vegapunk. "I am," Vegapunk replied, standing up straighter. From his vantage point, Milo could see the backs of his heels rising in an attempt to look taller. He could also feel the tension between the 2 males and debated showing himself. Another New Yorker stopped the potential fight by whispering something to Book, who nodded. "All right, sir, please follow our boat to the docks. I'm going to have to ask you to not attack the 2 other ships currently docked there. Both of them are from your side, and both belong to pirates." Book's words startled Milo. There were more pirates here. He wondered who they belonged to. Vegapunk nodded at Book, who then climbed down the side of the ship. The sound of revving engines was heard. The ship started moving again, and soon enough, the sounds of a harbor could be heard. He left the confines of the lower deck and joined Vegapunk, who was marveling over the size of the buildings surrounding the docks. "Absolutely incredible," he said in awe. "Just think of what we could do with this kind of technology. You have to show me how to use it." The last sentence was an order, Vegapunk looking at Milo expectantly for an answer. Milo nodded, but he knew he didn't want to. The man was crazy, and Milo wanted no more association with him. But Milo was relieved that he had been correct in his assumption they were in the Atlantic Ocean. Now that they were in New York, Milo could start thinking of a plan to get away. The pirate ships were 2 docks over, but still in plain sight. He didn't recognize either of them. He briefly wondered if they would be willing to help him. He didn't bother asking Vegapunk. The man seemed lost in his own world. Instead, Milo let the man sit by himself at the bow and talk to himself. Milo took a seat at the starboard railing and stared out over the city. There weren't as many reporters standing around anymore. Just 2 small crews. The hype about another world must have died down since he had last been there. A school bus pulled up, and Milo almost laughed. They must have gotten used to it if they were giving school tours. Kids started filing out, Milo ducking down as some of them looked up. They looked like teenagers. "Vegapunk, sir," a sailor said, approaching the man. Milo looked over. "There are people requesting a tour of the ship. They claim that it's a learning experience." Vegapunk's head darted to the side. "Learning experience, huh? Well, I like learning. Let them on." The sailor nodded, walking away. Milo saw Book standing at the railing, a ladder behind him, and turned his back on the man. He really didn't want to be questioned, or have his identity compromised. Looking over the railing, at the docks, he tried to judge the distance. Vegapunk's ship was about 6 meters tall, but part of that length was in the water. And then the dock cut off even more. So he was about 4 meters from the dock. At least, he hoped he was 4 meters from the dock. If he wanted to get out of here, he would have to jump. Maybe he could pull an Iron Man and use his fire to slow him down as he fell. But he shook the idea from his head. He did have more control over his abilities than before, but he was still only a beginner when using them. He looked back at Book and the sailor, noting that another person had joined them. A person Milo recognized. It was his history teacher. The one who was obsessed with current events. Students began appearing over the ladder, the teacher and Book helping them over the railing. Milo recognized a few of them, having seen them in the halls or library. They were in the next grade. He tuned out their chattering, hoping they would ignore him. No such luck. He probably should have realized it, knowing teenagers. "Hey there," a voice said behind Milo, and he grimaced. "What?" Milo ground out, hoping his tone would drive him away. "Are you like, a Marine in training or something? 'Cause you look too young to be with them." Milo looked to his right, where one of the students was standing. "I'm a special case. Definitely not a Marine." "No, so what are you doing here? I was told everyone here were Marines." "Oh, and a pirate. But I'm assuming the pirate is in the brig or whatever." "There's no brig on this ship," Milo said. "It's a research vessel, and I'm the pirate they're talking about." The student raised his eyebrows. "You still look too young." "It's a family thing," Milo shot back. "My sister is 12, and a pirate." "Right, I'm serious. I haven't met the entire crew yet, but I was also told there was a talking reindeer, a cyborg, an ex-assassin, and a living skeleton. I've also met the womanizing cook and the sharpshooter, along with the swordsman / ex-pirate hunter / first mate, and his daughter." The student laughed. "Well, that would make for an interesting story." Milo laughed too, wouldn't it? "Before I was caught, I was traveling with the Whitebeard pirates. They've come here before." "Yeah. I remember seeing them on the news. That guy, Book, or whatever his name is, said that the captain of that ship could turn himself into a phoenix. Is that right?" Milo nodded, turning his head sharply as Book walked past. Brushing some of his hair into his eyes, he pulled the hood of his jacket up. Did he mention the fishman? Said something about merfolk. The student answered. By the way, my name is Jack. What's yours? Milo said. Then, lowering his voice, he said, Monkey D. Milo. Why are you whispering? Milo shrugged. Because they don't know who I am. My parents are famous pirates, and I'm worried that if the Marines find out they'll use me to get to them. You have famous parents? How was that growing up? Milo smirked. I didn't know. I grew up in New York. In fact, I went to your school, before it vanished. Once we were on the Grand Line did I find out my father was the king of the pirates. Jack stared at Milo for a long minute. You were one of the people at the school, he hissed, loud enough for several other students to look at him. And, Pirate King? You were the guy who shouted at the other marine ship? Milo nodded, stiffening as he saw Book walking over. Anyway, I should probably get going. Where? Jack asked, confused. There's no way I'm hanging out with a crazy madman. The only reason I'm alive right now is because I ate one of his devil fruits. I'm from here, so I'll find one of my friends. Besides, those shifts have a bad habit of finding me. I'm sure I'll be back in that world before long. See ya. With that, Milo vaulted over the side of the ship. As he plummeted, instinct took over. Holding out his hands, jets of flame burst from his palms and slowed down his fall. Landing, he closed his hands, cutting off the flow of fire, and started running up the dock. Sparing a glance back, he saw Jack's surprised expression. Sparing a wave, he darted through the crowds and allowed himself to blend in. He heard Vegapunk's enraged howls from the ship, and he quickly shed his marine-issued jacket. Tossing him, he started running. Leaving the docks behind, he heard the wail of sirens. The sound was unfamiliar to him, after hearing waves and the creak of ships for the past few months. He ducked into an alley, shivering in only an old vest and black shorts Marco had given him. He exited the other side of the alley, onto a familiar street. He smiled to himself, walking to a crosswalk and speeding across. He got several strange looks, wearing shorts and a vest in this weather, but he didn't care. If he focused, he could draw out the heat in his core and keep himself warm. And if anyone asked, he could claim to be running. He had seen people in shorts in the dead of winter running down his street. He was close to his house right now. He could sneak in and grab some less suspicious clothes. And maybe some money. All he had on him was a few hundred berry, and they didn't take that currency here. Shoving his hands in his pocket, he also noted that he still had his spyglass. His father had given it to him the first day of their voyage. Drawing it out, he frowned when he saw a crack across the main lens. It must have happened when he wrestled with the Marines back on the Sharpshooter's Island. What was his name again? USO something. He couldn't remember off the top of his head. Carefully placing it back in his pocket, he started jogging. Only 6 blocks until he reached his house. That wasn't as far as Vegapunk made him run each day. His body was itching to move. Giving in, he sped up, sprinting now. The houses around him blurred as his feet pounded against the pavement. Almost forgetting he was back in New York, he passed his house and had to turn back. The yard looked overgrown, but that was expected. How many months had it been? His 17th birthday was coming up soon. He dug around in his garden for a few minutes before remembering that he hadn't bothered to lock the door behind him the last time he was here with the police chief. That in mind, he walked up to his front door and opened it. Hold it! Someone shouted from the street. Malcolm? Milo asked, turning around and looking at the source of the voice. The teenager in question dropped his bag and stared slack-jawed at the pirate. Malcolm? Milo repeated, a smile growing on his face. It's you. Am I Milo? Malcolm asked, his face pale. But that's impossible. You, and Andy, and Tim, you guys are all gone. I came back, Milo said, hopping off his front step and down his driveway. I have a lot of explaining to do, I guess. But first, I need to change. Want to come in? Malcolm nodded, still looking shocked. He picked up his backpack and slung it over his shoulder, following Milo up the empty driveway and into the house. Fair warning, Milo said, nodding towards the fridge, don't open that. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I need to shower, and grab some clean clothes. He paused. Never mind. No water. No electricity. I'm just going to grab some clean clothes and money. Be down in a couple of minutes. Malcolm nodded while Milo went upstairs to his room. Nothing had changed since he had last been there, but it looked unfamiliar. Grabbing an old overnight bag, he stuffed several changes of clothes inside, along with his secret stash of money. Entering his parents' room next, he dug through his mother's clothes until he found her secret stash as well, adding that to his own. They wouldn't mind, he hoped. Heading back downstairs, he saw Malcolm examining the pile of school material on the counter. "You want to come to my place?" he asked. "Mom won't mind. She'll be glad to know that your mom's all right." Milo smiled gratefully. "That would be great. I was going to stay at a hotel, but I'm not sure they'd take me looking like this," he gestured to himself. His shirt was crusted with salt, and he was stained with dirt and sweat. "Do you need anything else?" Milo shook his head. "Most of my stuff is back on the Moby 2 or the Thousand Sunny, and the toothbrushes are moldy." Malcolm shuddered. "You can use mine then." They left the house, Milo following Malcolm up the street. "So," Malcolm began hesitantly, looking at Milo, who was walking beside him. "How did you get back, anyway?" "I've been watching the news, and it's been talking about these shifts, and energy spikes and all the like. There was a marine ship that came through this afternoon. The school announces what happens." "What school are you going to now?" Milo asked, ignoring the question for the moment. "St. Andrews." Malcolm said. "Well," Milo sighed, "I was on the marine ship. It may sound crazy, but my parents are pirates from that world. I got a bounty too, or so I was told. I haven't actually seen the wanted poster yet." "What about the others?" Malcolm asked. "Andy and Tim, are they doing all right?" "As far as I know," Milo said. "I haven't seen them since I left with Mom and Dad on their ship. But they're in the care of the Marines, and most of the lower-ranked ones are trustworthy. At least that's what Dad says. To be fair though, he hates Marines." Malcolm laughed. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "All right," Milo said, thinking. "Remember the adventure stories Dad would tell us when we were younger?" Malcolm nodded. "We would always have sleepovers at your house just so we could hear them." "They're true. Mom and Dad are pirates, and the stories they told were of their adventures." "No way. It's true," Milo insisted. "I met the swordsman. He does have green hair. And I've also met the sharpshooter with the long nose, and the womanizing cook." "That's it? Well," Milo scratched at the back of his head. "I got separated from them a week after we left. I've spent most of my time with Marco and the Whitebeard pirates. Oh, and I had an uncle. He was a Whitebeard pirate too." "You met your uncle?" Malcolm asked. Milo shook his head. "He's dead. Died when Dad was about my age." "Oh," Malcolm said. "So," he sounded awkward, unsure of what to say. "Marcos told me about him. He was in the stories too, Fire Fist. The guy who could light himself on fire," Malcolm recalled. "He was a cool character. I didn't know he died though. He just stopped appearing in the story." "Me neither. Mom told me they kept that out of the stories because it was hard on Dad. They were close. I was supposed to be named after him, but they changed it at the last minute." "What was his name?" "Ace. Portgas de Ace. That's what Marco told me. Mom just said his name was Ace." "Ace would have been the coolest name," Malcolm muttered, as they turned onto his street. "So what happened?" "Dunno. There was a war, and all I know is that's where Dad got his scar." "That big one on his chest?" Malcolm asked. "I've always wondered, is that all you know?" "Yeah." Milo nodded. They approached Malcolm's house. Walking in, Malcolm shouted for his mother before turning to Milo and telling him to make himself at home. Milo placed his bag on the kitchen counter as Malcolm emptied out his school bag. "I almost forgot about school," Milo commented, earning a laugh from Malcolm. "Must be nice." Milo shrugged, kicking off his sandals and placing them by the door. "I've been learning a lot about ships. Marco's been showing me around the rigging. I can load and shoot a cannon now, if you'll believe it." "You'll have to show me," Malcolm said, as his mother walked into the room. "Hi Mom. This may be a bit of a surprise, but Milo came back from the other world. Can he stay here, if you don't mind?" "Hi, Mrs. Weaver," Milo greeted. The woman's reaction was similar to Malcolm's. Her eyes widened and the basket of laundry on her hip fell to the ground. "Milo monkey," she exclaimed. "You're filthy. Of course you can stay. Go have a shower and get cleaned up. and bring those clothes down. I'll wash them right away. Go, off with you." Milo was ushered into the nearest bathroom, barely having time to grab a fresh change of clothes. The shower felt heavenly, and the water ran brown for the first few minutes. He scrubbed off all the salt and grime that had accumulated. They're WBY too, but they were communal and he was reluctant to use them. Finally feeling clean, he dried off and changed into his jeans and long-sleeved shirt, bunching up his borrowed clothes and re-entering the kitchen. Mrs. Weaver and Malcolm were waiting for him in the kitchen. "You lost your tan," Malcolm exclaimed. "It was all dirt," Milo said, as Mrs. Weaver took Milo's old clothes from him and vanished into the basement. "I missed being clean." "What do you plan to do?" Malcolm asked, shoving aside his math textbook. "I mean, your parents are in the other world, and you can't ask those Marines for help, considering you're a pirate. What about going to the police?" "They know I'm a pirate. I kinda told off the police chief." "Wow," Malcolm said. "I never thought you would do that. You're the kind of person to go along with everyone else." "I know," Milo said. "But I've been on my own for how long? I've given up trying to go with the flow, since the normal there isn't the normal here. My God, the people on that ship were crazy. And even the people Dad knows. Zoro's this extremely intimidating guy, with a crazy teenage kid. And on Marco's ship, Haruta. She's absolutely insane. She wears these ruffled collars and," Milo shuddered. "You had me at ruffled collars," Malcolm said, shuddering as well. "I almost want to meet her." Apparently she and my uncle used to play pranks on each other. They had a bit of a rivalry. Malcolm raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything pursuing that topic. "How much do you remember about math?" "Nothing," Milo said immediately. "Absolutely nothing." Malcolm groaned as he pulled his math textbook closer. "Lovely." Mrs. Weaver laughed at her son's expression, returning to the kitchen. "I've set up the guest room for you, Milo. It's great that you're back. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, ma'am," Milo said politely, "and my parents are fine too." "What about your sister? She's adapted very well, but I haven't seen her in months." Mrs. Weaver nodded understandingly. "You must be tired. Don't hesitate to head to bed. Are you going to enroll in the local high school, or wait and see what happens?" "If it's all the same to you, I think I'll wait," Milo said. "I want to go back, find Marco or my parents. And stay the hell away from Vegapunk." He leaned his elbows against the table. "I also want to find out more about the two worlds. Last time I was here one of the scientists, Taylor, I think, said the two worlds were fusing. If that's happening, I don't have to worry about getting back. But it also brings new problems." "Like?" Malcolm questioned. "The Marines. From what I've heard from my parents, the Marines are dead set on controlling everything. They don't like to be defied. So if we introduce them to the US government, there's going to be trouble. And the pirates. Tons of pirates out there, and they're vicious." "Aren't you a pirate?" Malcolm asked. "You said your parents were pirates." "Yeah, but Dad's a different case. He's the king of the pirates. He likes adventure more than plundering. It's Mom who likes the treasure, but she's pretty good about not stealing from people. No, it's the pirates that like killing. Whenever they're set with a challenge, they won't hesitate to cut down anyone in their way. So if the problem's just the pirates, we can handle that," Malcolm said. Milo shook his head. "If it turns into a war, the pirates might have the advantage." "And what's that? Devil fruits. What are those?" "Hell if I know. All I can tell you is that if you eat one, you get super awesome powers. Like Fire Fist in Dad's stories. But there are more out there. Dad has one, and 3 others in his crew do too. A lot of people in Marco's crew do too. And since they're both pirate crews, I'm assuming many other crews have them too. I've heard rumors. The kid pirates, their captain has control over metal things. And he and Dad have an old grudge against one another." Malcolm's expression turned serious. His brow creased slightly as he processed Milo's words, twirling his pencil in his fingers. "Well then, shit just might go down." "That's what I'm afraid of," Milo said, tapping the table lightly. "I know about those who have devil fruit abilities. I know they can't swim, and the ocean dulls their strength. Something called sea prism stone does something too. I'll keep an eye on the news for now, see if anything happens. My uncle had one too. From what Vegapunks told me, they grow in the wild. If a person eats one, they get the abilities. But once they die, it regrows." That's strange, Malcolm said. Yeah, he said it tunes in with the user's nervous system, and then makes changes to the body from there. The best one is the logia. It turns the user's body into whatever they've eaten. Well, it's hard to describe. My uncle had the logia flame one, and his body could turn into fire. That sounds dangerous, Malcolm commented. Milo shrugged. Could be useful. Since Dad's a famous guy back there, because if it gets out I'm his kid, I'm going to be targeted. That sounds serious. You've really changed, he said. Have I? Milo didn't sound surprised. I suppose that comes with what I've been through. He laughed. But I suppose that's all right. I'll get used to it soon enough. What I want to do right now is catch up on the video games I've missed. I've been waiting for the next Tomb Raider to come out. I suppose it's out now. Malcolm grinned, closing his textbook with a snap and grabbed Milo's wrist. Well, let me show you how to play. Milo grinned, matching Malcolm's as he was dragged into their den. He grabbed a controller, familiarizing himself with it before the game started. It was good to be back. As he and Malcolm played, Milo was able to shove the nagging thoughts to the back of his mind for the time being.